Hi everyone, my name is Farzaneh. I'm the Learning and Development Specialist at CERIC, and on behalf of CERIC and our partner LMIC, I'd like to welcome you back to our webinar series. Today is the second webinar series, and we are delighted to have our second presenter, Sareena Hopkins, with us, who will discuss and share the results of recent research mapping the scope of practice and competence of career development professionals. But before we get started, just a very quick reminder that you can interact with our presenter and ask your questions or share your comments at any time by using the questions function you see on your screen. We will have a Q&A session where Sareena will address all your questions. So please don't hesitate to ask your questions. Also, please note that we will send you the recording of today's webinar along with the presentation slide later today. So now I'm happy to be joined back by Bolane, economist at LMIC, our amazing partner for this series, who will introduce you to Sareena. So over to you, Bolane.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me again. Again, my name is Bolane, economist at LMIC. Today I have the pleasure of working with a dear friend of LMIC, Sareena Hopkins. So Sareena is the Executive Director of the Canadian Career Development Foundation, CCDF. She works in Canada and internationally to strengthen the reach and impact for career development. With her team at the CCDF, Sareena moves from ideas to action in areas of public policy, research and development, capacity building, and advocacy. Sareena, over to you.
Thanks, Bolane, and thanks to LMIC for sponsoring this workshop, this webinar series, and of course, thanks to CERIC for your gracious hosting. So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining today for what I hope will be a chance to take a step back from, the whirlwind of daily practice, just to feed yourself, both personally and professionally. I want to begin by acknowledging that we are scattered across a vast geography of land that belongs to Indigenous peoples. I live and work and learn on land that belongs to the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, and I want to pay my respect to their culture and to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I look forward to a day when our work is more fully and directly informed by Indigenous wisdom and knowledge, and when our practice and our approaches and our systems are no longer have remnants of colonialism and racism, and that those are eradicated from our work. I also acknowledge that thanks to both COVID and the wonders of technology, we are spending a heck of a lot of time staring at our screens. And that could make us feel kind of alone and remote from our peers, from our colleagues, from our friends. And yet today here, I'm welcoming you into our home. And I'm vividly aware of the deep connections between us as we experience and share this very, very strange reality of this past year, and as we come together to rebuild our communities and to look forward and build our profession to make it stronger. So at Connexus 2019, I took a deep gulp and got up on that big daunting stage and made a bold statement. I said that career development is a superpower. That statement seemed to really resonate with career development professionals, both across Canada and internationally. And I think maybe it felt like a bit of a moment of recognition, a chance to look in the mirror and see what has always been there, but just wasn't fully visible until it was named. There's a chance to embrace the full potential of our field, its reach and its impact, knowing that indeed it is a superpower. I believe that that statement was true in 2019, and I believe it is infinitely more true today. And I'm not alone in recognizing the increasing importance and power of career development. Back in June of 2019, right in the heart of the pandemic, Anthony Mann from the OECD said this: He said that never before in human history has career guidance or career development, as the terms that we use here in Canada, never before has it been so important. And since Anthony's statement, the world, of course, has been turning upside down with COVID. And so in September of 2020, he sort of added an addendum to that statement, saying that even before the pandemic, the case for investment in career development was never stronger. Now, he said, it's irresistible. And I could not agree more. In fact, I'd suggest that career development has never been more at the heart of our collective angst, but also our collective hope as a society. This is a time, obviously, of intense challenge for all of us, but for our field, I also think it's a time of intense opportunity. Career development literally is purpose-built to help people to get through complex and unpredictable life transitions, including pandemics. Our theories, our approaches, our interventions, all of them are exactly what we need to not only survive this pandemic, but to move to recovery and beyond that to thriving. You know, the Canadian government moved very quickly to mobilizing emergency response programs to help people survive with the pandemic. It was brilliant, it was needed, and largely it was effective. But the next step to move from survival to recovery to thriving calls for a much more strategic and thoughtful response. Governments do tend to boil down sort of complex socioeconomic, educational, and labor market challenges to skills deficits or skills mismatches. Our discourse in Canada, in my view, has been myopic in the focus on fixing our current woes through a skills agenda. If we just train people and with the right skills and put them in shiny new jobs, all will be well. Of course, job skills are important, but I really do believe that we need to move beyond this. Learning new skills alone is not going to reset the clock for us personally or for our economy. What's clear to me and what I think the research really points to is that career development lies at the heart of a full and sustained recovery. So I think there's an unprecedented opportunity for us as a field, as a profession, to step out of the shadows and make a difference on a scale and scope like never before. So how do we grab this opportunity? I have come to believe that in order for us to fully embrace that potential, we can actually take several lessons from fictional superheroes. So I think it's important at this point in my talk to establish my credentials on this matter. I have been with my partner Nigel for over 38 years. Clearly, I love him. But like all of us, he has the odd quirk. And one of his quirks is his lifelong obsession with superheroes. As a kid, he pored over Marvel comic books, religiously saving his allowance to go to the corner store to get the latest drop. When superheroes came to TV, he was glued to the screen. And we, to this day, because he is an avid collector of those little miniature figurine superheroes, to this day, we have a bookshelf in our basement that is like a shrine to superheroism, and you can see that in the photo on the slide. So, you know, even now, I am reluctantly, semi-reluctantly lured to watching the latest superhero movie every time one comes out. So all this to say, I have 38 years plus of accumulated knowledge about superheroes and their powers. And although I'm not the fanboy that Nigel is, I have come to appreciate that, in fact, these stories express a universal story, the hero's journey, popularized by Joseph Campbell. And it's an expression of our collective struggle to overcome challenge and to thrive. That in reality, these superheroes and their stories are not just entertaining, they are also instructive. And they offer lessons that are readily applicable to our real lives, to our learning, and to our work. So I thought I'd put my fake PhD in superheroism to good use for today's session. I want to share my top lessons gleaned from superheroes that, if we heed them, will position us as a profession to much more strongly grab this moment of history and to help our society, our communities, to move from disruption to recovery to thriving. So, superhero lesson number 1, know your MO. Know what it is that you have to offer this world. Superman always has his eye set on the target, whether it's swooping in to lift a car off the train tracks or to catch a person falling toward disaster. His laser vision zeroes in on exactly what he's trying to achieve. What about us? Does our field have a clear and consistent understanding of what we're trying to achieve? Do we have shared understanding within our field of our scope of practice? Do we have common language and common boundaries with respect to what's in and what's out when it comes to being a career development professional? Do those outside of our field understand our scope of practice beyond the notion that we get people jobs? I'm curious what you think. So we're going to have just a quick poll asking you, do you think that we as CDPs and the public share a common and clear understanding of what we do and can offer as a profession? So I'm just going to stop talking and let the poll, the magic of the poll, happen.
The poll is launched, Sareena. I think we will see the responses in a few seconds. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Rosanna.
No worries. So 10 seconds and we will close the poll. Okay, so you can see the results here. We have 15% yes and 85% no.
Okay, well, I mean, those results don't surprise me a lot. You know, the lack of common language and understanding of our scope, let alone common language about what we call ourselves, was highlighted in Catherine's webinar last week. We saw that in some of what she was presenting. So I've been spending a lot of time with colleagues in a series of community-based research projects, really trying to define in detail our scope of practice, what it is we do when it comes to serving individuals or groups. With a framework called the employability dimensions that might be familiar to quite a few of you, we've been working to try to solidify common language for and understanding of the developmental career needs that our field sets out to address. So it looks pretty simple, but in my experience, simplicity is one of the hardest things to achieve. And though I'm not going to dive into each of these in any kind of detail, because that would be a session unto itself, I do just want to highlight that the continuum of developmental needs that our field addresses with the person and their life-wide and lifelong career development journey right at the center. So starting with pre-employability, you know, certainly our field focuses very much on helping people to identify and overcome issues that may be getting in the way of them being ready for focused work in the area of career development. So these may be very practical barriers, like a lack of transportation to get to school or work, a lack of safe housing, or a lack of access to needed services like addictions or mental health services. Or they may be more around personal readiness, but in my experience, if we ignore those pre-employability issues, they will come back to haunt us and haunt those that we work with. And the most recent research that we've done would suggest that for those working on the front lines of career and employment services, well over 90%, in the high 90s percentage of clients will come with presenting needs in these areas. And our work is very much focused, particularly in the early part of our service delivery, on trying to address those issues creatively and strategically with folks. For sure, our work encompasses career exploration, helping people to explore inward to get a better sense of their own interests and values and motivations and preferences, what makes them want to get out of bed in the morning, but also exploration outward, expanding the horizons of what's possible, being aware of a broader diversity of possibilities in the labor market so that both their self-awareness and labor market awareness can inform decision-making. For sure, our work includes skills enhancement, helping people to build the skills, both formally and informally, and to get the credentials that they need to pursue the kind of work that they're interested in. Work search and work development is often what we're unitarily connected with. People see us as the profession that help people get jobs, and certainly that's a piece of what we do. There's no doubt helping people to creatively and strategically look for or create work in an ever-changing labor market, and doing that in a way that's tailored to them, tailored to the industry that they're applying for, tailored to the job, tailored to the company. We certainly help people to get work. We also help people to keep work. Sometimes folks that we serve are great at getting work, but terrible at keeping it. And so sometimes our work is around work maintenance. And finally, career growth. Just like us, the world around us is changing, and our work as career development professionals is most certainly not just responsive to crises. Our work is also about helping people to be proactive in being lifelong managers of their careers and architects of their future at every stage of their lives. And of course, at the very center of our work is the person. This area of dimension focuses on intrapersonal factors. We help people to deepen, and in some cases to foster, a belief in self. Our work is about building hope. Our work is about helping people to explore and be open to new possibilities, to build resilience and the capacity to bounce back, and to help them to really take charge and to be those architects of their own future. And key to our work across all those dimensions is helping people to determine where across that constellation of employability dimensions are their strengths and their needs, and using those strengths as a foundation and using those needs to inform what kinds of interventions we deliver. So now you might argue, and some of you did, that all of this is clear, that we are already clear about our scope of practice, both inside and with respect to the public. But I will say that my experience at parties, when I used to go to them back in the day, when I introduced myself as a career professional, the blank stares that I got would suggest that maybe it's not so clear. And I think the fragility of our funding also reinforces that. So I would say that ultimately, if our field is going to be cohesive in our professional identity and targeted in our impact, we need to have a clear and shared understanding of our scope of practice, what it is we do. It may seem obvious, but in my experience, it's not. I think that it is not at all consistently clear what it is we really do as a field, either internally, understanding it in a common way with our colleagues, but most certainly not in terms of how we are seen from the outside. So I would suggest that we need to start by getting crystal clear about what it is we do as a field internally, and then get really clear and loud and proud about it with the public. Okay, superhero lesson number 2, know your unique powers. Only Spider-Man can spin a web to catch bad guys and use his web to swing from building to building like he does. And only Wonder Woman has that magical electrified whippy thing that she uses. So what about us? What are our unique superpowers as a career professional? Well, we're on the home stretch of a project that has set out to define in measurable detail the competencies, the unique professional superpowers that underpin quality career services. This new competency framework really is a pretty bold leap from our original Canadian standards and guidelines that we developed 20 years ago. Like the original, This new framework was built with and by frontline career practitioners from across Canada. But we did so not alone this time. We recognize that we're the experts in career development, but we're not the experts when it comes to occupational standards. And so we worked in partnership with occupational standards experts. Didn't even know that that was a thing until we undertook this project. But it is, and there are experts out there that their profession is to set standards across a whole range of sectors. And so we partnered with them this time around and set out to make our competency framework ISO compliant. And it was a big mountain, I will say, but it felt important to really elevate our sector to a standard that was recognized across multiple sectors. So the full competency framework is comprised of 4 groupings of competencies. The first, professional practice, are competencies that we share with lots of other human service professionals in different sectors. Things like building a working alliance or working with diversity and inclusion. The CDP characteristic competencies are those that are uniquely ours. They're generic enough that they would cut across multiple roles in the career development sector, but unique to us in the sense that they distinguish us from counselors, from HR professionals, from social workers, from other related professions. The CDP extended competencies are competencies that a CDP might need to specialize in an area within the career development profession. And the outreach and leadership competencies really recognize the importance of leadership and research and development and advocacy and community capacity building and supervision and mentoring in our field. And so all told, there are 100 competencies in the new framework, and each one is delineated in, I will say, excruciating detail. This slide outlines the content that's covered in each and every one of the 100 competency profiles. You know, if we are going to elevate our field to be seen, not just by internal eyes, but also by external eyes as a true profession, we need to get serious about defining and demanding excellence. And so this initiative is one small piece of trying to do that in a really rigorous and meaningful way. Okay, superhero lesson number 3, know who you serve. Superheroes deeply embrace their own sense of service and never seem to miss someone in need or a cause that's worth fighting for. So what about us? Are we clear on who we really serve? You know, our field has been largely entrenched in a one-on-one based model rooted in counseling, in which the person sitting across from us is our client. And our interventions are all geared to serving that client well, and our priority is always to address their needs. It's useful, I think, though, for us to consider if indeed we can serve that person sitting across from us well, if we don't, at least to some extent, broaden our thinking and our practice to include other potential clients. So sticking first with those individuals with career needs, are our clients only those that knock on our doors, either actually or virtually, requesting services? Or is part of our role also identifying and reaching out to those who aren't knocking? Those who may need our services for various reasons, but are not accessing them. And what about employers? Are employers our clients? If part of our role is helping people to connect with jobs and to improve workplaces, don't we also need to be really closely connected and working with employers? If we don't understand employers' needs, how do we help individuals to connect with the right employers for them? And if we know nothing about their workplaces, how do we know if they're decent? Should we care? And if so, what's our role? Might we have a role helping employers support the ongoing career development needs of their employees? And wouldn't doing these things be extending our impact and maybe even creating a bit of a multiplier effect? Likewise, when it comes to working in schools, if you work in a school, Are other educators your clients? If you could support them to integrate career development directly into their classes, including whatever subject that they're teaching, making those linkages between those subjects and real life work applications, wouldn't that be benefiting your students? And wouldn't it be amplifying our work in career development? And of course, surely, if you're working to help students make successful transitions from secondary to post-secondary, aren't post-secondaries also our clients, really understanding their programs and their systems and promoting access for our students? Are other colleagues that deliver different kinds of human services, be they addiction services or mental health services in our community, are they also our clients to some extent? You know, so many of the individuals that we work with are mired in the bureaucracy of social services, and they need supports that they don't know about and can't access for a whole variety of reasons. And especially since COVID, career practitioners have really become the front line for people with complex and multiple social service needs. So if we don't have a firm grasp on the network of available services in our community, if we don't know how to access those services, and if we don't have strong networks, how do we help people that we work with cut through the red tape? What about resource developers and LMI developers? Are they our clients? You know, in our field, we do not tend to be economists and labor market analysts, but similarly, LMI developers and resource developers often are not career development experts. It's when we come together and pool our expertise that magic can happen. You know, LMIC is sponsoring this workshop series, and you know, they are actively reaching out in a whole variety of ways to our sector, asking for us to get involved, whether it's through RFPs, whether it's through calls for involvement on advisory groups. They're wanting actively to engage with our sector, and I really encourage you to respond to that call, because as I said, when we come together and bring career development expertise to the process of creating our tools and our labor market information, we're going to get resources and tools that much more reflect our real context, much more reflect our client needs and the needs that we have as practitioners as well. And what about funders and policymakers? Are they our clients? You know, I listened to the great debate last week. It was organized by the Career Development Institute in the UK, and it brought together thought leaders from our sector with UK parliamentarians. And as I listened to the informed and intelligent discourse, including, you know, the parliamentarians who were clearly informed about our field, I really felt the weight of how fully we have failed in Canada to inform and educate our own politicians when it comes to the content and the value of career development. There are obvious exceptions, but I think we have a long way to go on that front. And surely this is also in the best interests of those we serve. If our funders and policymakers understand what we do, its real impact and its value, surely to goodness that is in the best interest not only of us as professionals, but for those that we serve. And surely it's also in our best interest if those funders and policymakers are using better metrics to evaluate our services. So I have a few things to say about that later. And what about our broader advocacy role? The individuals that we serve live, learn, and work within broader systems, whether they are social service systems, educational systems, or labor market systems. So what's our role in celebrating and supporting good practice, whether it's in workplaces, in classrooms, or in other service agencies? And what's our role in calling out practices that are inequitable and unjust, and in helping to build better responses? We too, as professionals, work and learn in those systems too. And if they are broken, if the systems in which we function are broken, our capacity to help will be perennially limited. So what's our role in advocating, educating, and offering alternatives to the status quo? And what about the media and the broader public? Knowing how many people could benefit from career development but don't know about it or don't know how to access it is part of our role, making our profession more visible through either social or traditional media. I know it's nerve-wracking to be interviewed on TV or on radio, to put yourself out there, but invisibility is not serving our field well. So if all this sounds like way too much, that's fair. I know most people working in our sector literally run all day to keep up with the needs of the individuals that are in fact seeking services. So not every single person in our sector needs to serve every single one of these clients, but I would say that if nobody is reaching more widely, our field will be dangerously hidden and limited in terms of potential reach and impact, and seriously fragile when it comes to funding. So one last client to consider, and that's your professional association. If they are playing some of these roles on your behalf, you may want to consider how you can serve and support them, whether it's through membership dues or the odd volunteer gig or just amplifying their voices. Think about the leadership bodies that are supporting you as a professional. Okay, superhero lesson number 4, know your why. Superheroes are driven by a burning knowledge of purpose. They know their why. And so what about us? Why do we practice? We talked about what we do, but why do we do it? What's the impact of our work? The change that we want to be in this world? And if we know our why, how do we know we're actually achieving it? Do we actively collect evidence and share data demonstrating that we're succeeding in making these changes? People do not come to career services seeking the status quo. They are wanting change in their life. And our job is to support them to make those changes in strategic ways. Articulating the ways that our clients want to change, and in fact do change, is more than an exercise in clarity. It is fundamentally an exercise in meaning and quality. Metrics are not just mechanisms to evaluate the quality of service. Metrics also influence the quality of service. It's an old adage, what gets measured gets done. So when we use bad metrics to evaluate career services, especially when funding is tied to those metrics, we actually change how services are delivered and we erode the meaning and quality of what we're trying to evaluate. I'll give you a concrete example, and I suspect that this will be a familiar one to many of you. Funding in public and employment services in many jurisdictions across Canada has been tied to getting people quickly into work or training. And so instead of listening and responding to people's real needs, practitioners are incentivized to push clients prematurely into jobs or into courses, which of course leads to false starts and failures, not to mention dissatisfaction with services, creating this full circle of bad metrics leading to bad service, leading to bad outcomes. So over the last decade, we've been trying to build a tool that is really purpose-built to collect much more robust and meaningful metrics as a mechanism to promote quality. So using the employability dimensions that I referenced earlier, we articulated specific indicators of client change that could be assessed under each one of those dimensions. The tool that we've created is called Prime, and it's meant to promote quality in both evaluation and in service delivery by changing the equation in 3 important ways. The first, it's enabling our sector, and this is important, to take charge of its own data story by collecting robust, meaningful metrics that reflect our why. So in addition to the blunt outcomes of whether a person gets employed or in training, we're tracking and reporting the whole backstory of impacts being achieved that are not only life-changing for the individuals we serve, but also cost savings for governments. So whether it's improvement in mental health or increased hope and resilience, or the extent to which a job is likely to be sustainable, PRIME is intended to capture those incremental and substantive changes that occur in people's lives as they receive career services. The second way that we're trying to change the equation, we knew that we needed to create a mechanism to make it easy for the front lines to collect data seamlessly as part of their regular service delivery. Sadly, it's kind of a universal truth in Canada that frontline practitioners don't exactly adore their data reporting systems. And you know, it's not, in my experience, at all because they don't want to demonstrate their value and impact. They simply have not had usable tools to do so. So it's only when evaluation is easily integrated into regular service delivery, and indeed experienced by frontline practitioners and their clients as enhancing and supporting quality service, only then are we going to have big data, and only then are we going to have a true culture of evaluation in our sector that is driven from within, reflecting our own why and feeding continuous improvement. And finally, the third way we've been trying to change the equation is we set out to make a tool that made data accessible and useful for all. Data far too often goes off into the ether of reports to funders, never to be seen or heard from again. And we wanted to create a scenario in which data was for everybody. And so data is accessible and usable by the client themselves to inform their own career planning. Data is accessible and useful to the frontline practitioner to inform their practice, to the manager to inform the planning around what services are most needed and which ones are having the best impacts, by communities who want to look across the ecosystem to make the service system better as a whole, and of course to funders and policymakers too, but not just to them. So PRIME is just one tool, but it's one that's really trying to begin to clarify our why and change the relationship between evaluation and quality in Canada. Our most recent research using PRIME was conducted in partnership with 6 absolutely amazing agencies serving diverse clients across Newfoundland and Labrador. Some of you may be out there today. If so, thank you. And funded by the Newfoundland Workforce Innovation Center. And those 6 agencies used PRIME for 14 months. And the data story that emerged from that was truly powerful. For the first time ever, we had a detailed understanding of the dominant employability strengths and needs of those seeking services. It never ceases to astound me that this data is not a basic baseline of data that every community should have. Without that, how do you know what services are needed and where you should be investing to ensure that people's real needs are being met by the services that are being provided? So for the first time ever, there was a basis for making strategic decisions about what services are in fact most needed. For the first time ever, we have rich data about how clients actually change by virtue of receiving career and employment services. We have data about where they change the most and where they tend to get stuck. And we could slice and dice the data in really interesting ways to tell different stories. So for example, PRIME includes 16 indicators of mental health aligned to Redicop and Houston's most recent research. And we were able to see that clients demonstrated statistically significant positive changes across all 16 of those mental health indicators. So superhero lesson number 4 was really understand your why and be loud and proud about demonstrating it. So on to superhero lesson number 5, go to where the action is. You know, superheroes do not sit in their lairs or offices waiting for people in need to show up. They are ever watchful and they choose to go into difficult and uncomfortable situations to do their work. So I am not suggesting that we risk our lives, but I do wonder if we are as proactive as we might be. You know, in many settings, we do literally sit in our offices waiting for referrals or for problems to be identified before we intervene. With obvious and impressive exceptions, too many of us do wait in our offices or at our screens to see the next person with an appointment. And I wonder if this relatively passive model of service delivery is actually working for our field, and more importantly, for those who need our services the most. So my question is, what if we broke out of our offices? What if we started offering our services in unexpected places? What if we went to where people already are instead of waiting for them to come to us? So if we work with students, do we spend enough time in the classroom? That's where we've got a captive audience, and we can help students to see the connections between what they're learning in school and possible futures for them. If we're working with youth who are out of school, do we know where they hang out? And are we making our services visible and accessible there? Are we sensitive to offering services in the places that are comfortable and safe, given the cultures and identities of those we serve? Are we actively reaching out to meet underrepresented groups where they live and where they feel at home? And does this current pandemic and our imposed shift to working more remotely actually help or hinder our ability to do that? And if it's the latter, what's our responsibility? So I am super curious where you typically offer career services. These are just a few options. Feel free to check all that apply to you, and I'll just be really keen to see some of the creative ideas that might be in the other category. Maybe you could throw those into the chat function so that we can be inspired. So I'll just give you a few minutes to complete the poll.
We are receiving the responses, Sareena.
Great, thank you, Farzana.
No worries. So we have the results. 72% face-to-face. So because people had the option of choosing different responses, the accumulation will not be 100%. So 90% remotely online, 30% in classroom, 5% in people's homes, 21% other. And
that is really cool. I'm super curious what some of the other options are. So yeah, if they can be thrown into the chat, I'd be really interested to see, and maybe at the end of this we can hear from some of you about some of the unexpected places that you might be offering your services.
Some of the responses in the chat is I offer service via telephone calls, instant messages. One of them is I coach whoever I meet that is unemployed. I connect relatives on phone. So also we have again telephones, community center, career corners, group sessions in safe community spaces.
That's great. Oh, thank you. Thanks for the responses. That's really super interesting. Okay, so we've been conducting just a mini mapping study of our field, and our preliminary research would suggest that finding our services is a little bit like looking for a needle in a haystack. There is, from what we've been able to tell, almost no consistent branding or obvious mechanism to find us as career practitioners in Canadian communities. So in addition to making our services more proactive and more accessible and culturally safe, it would be game-changing, in my view, if we could also be more visible and clearly and consistently branded, so it was easy for people to find us in communities. All right, superhero lesson number 6. Use your powers for good. If there is one thing that defines a good superhero, it is that they use their powers for good to overcome evil, injustice, and hardship. And when I talked about our purpose earlier, my focus was more on our impact on the individuals we serve, but of course, our impact is so much broader. You know, as a field, we sit at the center of a triangle, linking citizens, individuals with learning and with work. And that makes us uniquely positioned to not only help individuals, but also to influence the educational and labor market systems that they move within and across, making these systems more effective, more efficient, and more ethical. If there's one thing that this pandemic has done, it is shine a spotlight on the inequities that have been with us for a very long time. Those who were already marginalized going into the pandemic have been hardest hit by it. Those who are homeless or lacking in clean water cannot possibly follow health guidelines. And in Canada, like in so many other parts of the world, the deepest job losses have been for youth, low-wage workers, women, and persons of color. The digital divide is more obvious than ever before. So in many communities, career services are the front line, the first to identify needs and the intermediary coordinating the response for people. So more than most, we are seeing firsthand the real pain points in people's lives. What's really happening in our labor markets, our workplaces, in our educational systems, in the classroom, and in our communities and homes. Are we positioning ourselves as experts ready to share frontline intelligence and propose policy and programming alternatives to employers, to governments, and to the public? And are we using our expertise to promote a more equitable and just response? And finally, superhero lesson number 7. Have you noticed how many action hero movies are now mashups, bringing previously lone wolf superheroes together to pool their superpowers to overcome evil and make the world better? Well, in case you're not married to Nigel, let me assure you that this trend is a real thing. So this points us to superhero lesson number 7, band together. And there are 3 really good reasons to do this. First, together we are stronger and more effective. Sharing best practices is better than recreating the wheel. Collaborating to collect and pool impact data makes for a way more compelling case. So if we want to be seen and heard by the public and by our governments, our voices will be much, much stronger if we join in common and collective messages. Secondly, it's a good reason to band together because we need to push each other. Superheroes are highly competitive, and they are constantly pushing each other to do better, to go further, and to never give up. Now, we are not exactly a field known for our competitiveness, and for me, that's a good thing. But we do need to hold each other to account, to continually push each other, to never become complacent, and to push our limits and our potential impact because our work is so important. And thirdly, and really importantly, we need to hold each other up. When push comes to shove, superheroes support each other and sometimes they save each other. If there has ever been a time when the caregiver needs care, it is right now. So we need to have each other's backs. We need to amplify each other's messages. We need to actively seek out ways to collaborate and be a united front. The world needs more career development, and that means the world needs more you. And so I encourage you to take care of you and to take care of each other. So those are my 7 lessons from Superheroes. Know your MO, know your unique powers, know who you serve, and know your why. Go to where the action is, use your powers for good, and band together. Each lesson is curated to position us for this current opportunity to extend and deepen our visibility, our impact, and our value. The work that you do each and every day is heroic work. I've said this before and I will say it again. It matters and it belongs at the center of education, working, and civic life. It makes a fundamental difference in the lives of those you serve, their communities, their employers, their families, and indeed to our socioeconomic health as a country and as a world. You and what you do deserves to be acknowledged, cherished, and celebrated. And so this leads me to one final bonus lesson from Superheroes. Superheroes know how to puff up, take credit, and embrace their awesomeness. After they've done something heroic, they literally strike the superhero pose and they savor the moment. There's actually research out of Harvard University, believe it or not, that concluded that standing in the superhero pose for just 2 minutes a day leads to all these amazing benefits. It reduces blood pressure and cortisol, it increases testosterone and success at work. So whether there is any truth at all to these claims, I will tell you that striking the pose, even if it's just for a few seconds each day, whether it's after a breakthrough session with a client or a particularly challenging meeting, feels awesome. So whether you ever get in the habit of striking the pose for 2 minutes a day, or whether you just do so in your head, I do encourage you to adopt the habit of pausing from time to time, thinking about the importance and the impact of what you do, and savoring the knowledge that you are a hero in someone's life today. So I thank you for this opportunity to share and to learn with each of you today, and I sure welcome your comments, your questions, and your ideas that this talk might have sparked for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sareena, for your presentations. So I don't want to waste time, and I will ask you the questions one by one. The first question was, how can we attain clarity? It is subjective. How do you know what skills we need for clarity?
So it's a good question. If I'm understanding the question correctly, how do we gain clarity about sort of our scope and the expertise that we need? I think it's a really good question, and it's not an easy question to answer, but I think it's an incredibly important question to keep asking ourselves. You know, human services are complex. Whenever you're working with an individual, the details of what we do each and every day is multiple and complex and ever changing. And so it is hard to really clearly articulate the bounds of that. What is our practice? But I think until we do that, as I said, I think we are going to be weaker as a field, weaker in terms of our visibility and weaker in terms of our impact. Because I think when we are clear, when we have a common language and a common understanding of our scope, we can help to see where our bounds of expertise lie, and we can really powerfully focus in on those areas that really align with our expertise. I truly believe that the competencies that underpin practice in our field are, although they overlap in many ways with other human service providers, there are distinct competencies that are really unique to us as career practitioners. And when we embrace those and apply them in a targeted way, I think that's when we become most effective in helping people to address their career development needs across the lifespan.
Thank you. So the next question is, can you elaborate on work maintenance and give some resources about that?
For sure, yeah. So, you know, it's interesting. a number of jurisdictions use the employability dimensions in their public employment service, and often work maintenance is one that actually isn't technically included. And I've always thought that odd, because at least in my experience on the front lines, often people can be successful in getting work, but often less successful in keeping it. So I think there's a couple of angles to look at this. The first is, and I think this is often the case, the first is, I think sometimes it's unresolved pre-employability issues. So that takes you right back to the pre-employability dimension. And if anyone's interested, I certainly can point to some resources specific to that. The other lens, so other than unresolved pre-employability issues, I think the other lens is understanding sort of the work culture. And you know, when we talk about the skills agenda, we often are zeroing in on job-specific skills, but we don't tend to think more broadly about the skills that you need simply to be in a workplace. You know, every workplace is a bit different. Every workplace culture is a bit different. And so helping people to really understand the norms in the workplace that they're wanting to enter, helping them to understand their own impact on those that they work with and their response to those that they work with, and helping to make those healthier and more productive is another lens around work maintenance. So my email is there. So if anybody is interested in sort of more concrete tools, really be happy to share ones that at least I'm aware of. I'm sure that others who are listening would have other suggestions too.
So I'm giving you the last question, I think, and as you said, they have your email, everybody has your email, they can contact you. The first question is about how to reach politicians and policymakers about these topics, and also people are asking for link for Prime. So I guess maybe you can help with that as well.
Sure. Well, in terms of the first question around policymakers and politicians, I mean, I don't know the magic bullet there. Like I said, my reflection was that we have a lot of work to do on that front in Canada. I sure have been impressed with the Career Development Institute, CDI, in the UK. They're doing some really creative things, including organizing that great debate that I referenced in my talk. You know, they are very visible on social media. They are writing directly to politicians. They are commenting with white papers on policies that are coming out. You know, I think there's probably multiple pathways in. One of the things that we tried to do in Canada a few years back was to organize a Hill Day. Many sectors do this. They sort of arrive on Parliament Hill with pre-meetings with every politician that they can possibly organize to meet with. Often going through your local politician is the easiest way to get one of those meetings. And you know, it is the incremental hard work of educating people, whether it's a politician, whether it's a neighbor, whoever it is. I think the more that we can think of part of our role being a role of education and awareness building, the better. Because, you know, I think there is no question at all that the evidence base is strong, that our work matters and it makes a difference and it's a good investment. But it's not known, it's not well known. And so I would say, you know, to start with your local politician, because that's part of their mandate to listen to their constituents. And in terms of Prime, my email is there. Feel free to contact me and I'd be happy to organize a demo for you or give you more information about it.
Thank you very much, Sareena. That was the last question. It was great. Thank you for your engagement, everybody. I'm sorry that we couldn't get to answer all the responses. The timing didn't let us to do that. Thank you for Sareena. Thank you for Bolanne for being here with us. We will continue and finish our series next Monday, March 15th at 12, with the third and last presenter, Anthony Mantion, Senior Economist with the Labor Market Information Council, LMIC, who will discuss and share resources and data sources for using LMI. But as for now, let me now close by wishing a good rest of the day and see you all next week.